Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Zanotti, and welcome to Lectora Live, your inside track into Lectora. And today we've got with us John Blackmon, CTO of Lectora, a good friend, and he's been on before, and he's going to talk all about responsive course design. Here we go. And we're back. Well, that's our new show intro with some of the alumni that have been on the show. And we have our top alumni of them all with us today, John Blackmon. Hey, John, how are you today?
Very good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm glad you could come on and talk a little bit about responsive course design. That's definitely something that's going to be very important over the next few years. And tell us a little bit about what responsive course design is for those who don't know.
Well, I actually could show you some of the things I have here on my screen. I've compared a bunch of different methods of responsive design, that people have used throughout the years, and then it kind of like goes into it. So if you'd like me to share my screen, I could show it to you that way.
That sounds great.
All right, so let me share the screen. Okay, and if it's showing up there now. Okay, so there's the logo. But we start with the different methods of e-learning design. Then there have been a lot of methods used. Traditional e-learning design has been what we call fixed width design, and that's very standard design, which it does not actually scale. Then you also have what's called fluid or scaling design, which kind of came after that. And then very popular is adaptive design in products like Captivate, and then responsive web design, which is also known as responsive design. You hear a lot about that these days. And then, of course, responsive course design from Trivantis or Lectora. So fixed design, what is that? That is when your pages are static. They're fixed in size on the screen. Nothing really changes, and it works extremely well when publishing the web because you have, a static output, where things are going to be. Drag and drop questions are no problem, matching questions, because things are on the screen where they're going to be. But it really doesn't work for viewing on multiple devices. And in today's world, you're always going to have multiple devices. Mm-hmm. So I have here a sample title. This is like a front screen page for a title on great astronomers. And this is a fixed width title. So you'll see as I shrink it down, we just get a scroll bar here along the bottom. And so it really doesn't adapt well to other devices. It doesn't respond well to other devices. It doesn't know about other devices. So if you looked at it on your phone, you would see this, and you'd have to scroll over here and work with it. Mm-hmm. Really not user-friendly, really not what you want. But this is the output of most traditional e-learning authoring tools today. And so along came fluid or scaling design, and this is a popular way to do it. And there are tools out there that are going to scale. I think Storyline is going to do some scaling. I'm not sure if they have that in yet, but some of the other tools are going to do this. And we have ways that you can do this through Lectora, through library objects to drop in that'll scale it. But what that does is it uses percentages for widths on everything, and the content just scales to fit the viewing area. That way you'll always have your content viewable in the viewing area. And it does work across a lot of devices, but it's not really that optimized. So let's take a look at that, see what that looks like. And so here's that same title, but it's scalable. And you'll see as you scale it down, tablet mode maybe, phone mode maybe, the content is all still there.
Yeah, glasses not included, right?
What's that?
Glasses not included.
Yes, exactly. You can't read it. It gets too small. Everything scales down. So on a mobile device, even on a tablet, it really is not exactly right. It does work, and I've seen for some people that this is what they want, but it's not really responsive. It's not really what you're looking for. So next version out there is adaptive design. So adaptive design, you target specific device widths. So for instance, in Captivate, where they target individual 3 device widths, and you create unique content for each width. Now you can do this and build on multiple devices. But there's a lot of rework. You need to build for each device. Everything is going to be different for each device, and then quite a lot of design. I don't really have an example of that, but here you can see I just show the same content, how it would be on each different device. So you would actually build it separately for each device and make sure it fits and go through. Quite a lot of work. It's also based on width. So depending on the width of your phone, this may or may not look like this. So if you have a different width phone, it may not fill the screen, or it may be too long, too short. It really, again, isn't a great solution.
Yeah, and you have to worry about the landscaping part of it. Are they watching it in portrait? Are they doing landscape? And that can cause all sorts of issues.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And just the variety of devices out there. I mean, everything's still based on width. So if your device has a different logical width than another device, you see something different. And if you have a phone with a high res, all the new phones with high res, a lot of times you end up getting what's supposed to be on the tablet and not what's on the phone. And so you don't,
Right.
It's not deterministic. You really don't know what you're getting. So along came the next one, which is responsive design. So responsive design is all based on the fluid grid concept. So what that means is the screen is broken down into about 12 grids generally, and the code underneath the covers uses what's known as media queries in CSS, which is the technology they use to determine the size of the viewing device it's on. And then they move in size according to the rules as the width is changed. Basically, the columns all fold up upon each other as you move down. So it's kind of cool. It works. The content works on multiple devices. It's great for things like news feeds where you have multi-column output. So the columns, it's very simple. The columns just fold upon themselves. However, it's kind of complicated to implement. Have you had to work with true responsive design? Because I'm sure if you have, it's a lot of work to implement.
I haven't, but I'm familiar with the columns folding in the grid idea, and
Right.
It is tricky.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. And you see this on all the news sites and all the things out there today. And many web pages are going to a multi-column layout just so that they can work consistently with the responsive design that's out there today. And this is what's in use out there. There's a lot of JavaScript frameworks out there like Bootstrap and so forth that work. And they all kind of work in the same way. But in addition to being complicated, it's also, again, it's not deterministic. So when you look at it on my phone and I look at it on your phone, they're going to be different because they're going to have different screen resolutions, and you really don't know exactly what you're going to get. It's going to fit, and you can work with it on there, but it's not deterministic. So, again, I have that same title, and this title's in an actual responsive view. So as I size it down, you'll see things are moving and sizing at the same time. So this has all been built in, so it knows, and when it hits a certain breakpoint, things will happen, and they'll move again, and they'll scale a little bit more, and they move down. And so here is it on one phone, but here it is on another phone. And as you see, things are going up and down and moving a little bit. So it's really not deterministic on each device. And it can be very challenging to create.
However, it's very readable at this point.
Yes. The fonts have been adjusted properly for each size. So you end up with something that still works very well. So even on that phone, you're never not going to be able to read it, which is,
that's pretty cool.
It's definitely an improvement. So each of these has improved along the way.
And what I like is the smartness of it in how it goes from having the 4 buttons or pictures across, and it's smart enough to put them one over the other.
Right. It's built in. It actually, and this example doesn't have it. Normally, when you get to a much smaller, it would actually fold this last column upon itself again, and you'd get a single column on the way down. But it didn't. This one doesn't have that. I didn't spend the time to write that, but I could have.
I could have.
A lot of work. It was definitely not simple, non-trivial to do, but it is something that you can do.
No, and it's actually pretty impressive because when you do see something like this, you don't wind up with a fixed result. You get something that's dynamic, which flows with the content. And actually, if you're not paying attention, you wouldn't even know it just resized everything. It's natural.
True. Yeah, and that's the whole idea of responsive.
That's very neat.
Yeah. All right, so we've tried to take, let's say, the best of all these. So the best part of each of these designs and put it together to what we call responsive course design. So with responsive course design, you really design for the device type and orientation, not the width. One of the things we found out when we were initially looking at putting responsive design into Lectora was that we started testing with a lot of devices, brought a lot of devices in-house, and we couldn't get a consistent look across the devices. And with e-learning design, it's a little bit different than your standard news feed design, which is in a columnar format. You're really looking for more of a WYSIWYG kind of a setup where you're able to lay out your screen, you know where things are, and things are working in relation to each other. So it matters what's on the left and what's on the right, or what is above and what is below. And so we decided that rather than basing it on width, we're going to base it on device type. So because of that, you only get 5 possible views. You get a desktop view, which is obviously desktop and laptop, a tablet landscape view, a phone landscape view, a tablet portrait view, and a phone portrait view. So these are the 5 possible views. So when you build something in responsive course design Lectora, everything is automatically responsively scaled and adjusted for each view. So we build out these views for you. And then when viewed on the device, the tablet and phone views will scale to fit the device screen width they're viewed on. So it automatically scales out. So it takes the best of both worlds in that area. So you'll get a deterministic view on that device.
Nice.
So in addition, you can also go to each individual view and move and size the objects within the view. So they get adjusted for you, but if you want to move things around, if you want to change the way they look, you can do that, and we'll do that for you. You can also add or remove any object from any view. So a lot of times when you're on the phone, you don't need necessarily the level of detail, or you just don't have room for the level of detail. You can take some of that content out if it's not important to the information that you're presenting. Object properties are inherited from the desktop view. So much like inheritance in standard Lectora, where you inherit from the title level all the way down, in responsive Lectora, you do inherit from the title down, but you also inherit from the desktop out, and you inherit in 2 directions, and I'll show you that in a moment, where you inherit on the landscape side and the portrait side. So that way you can manipulate objects on the landscape, and it won't affect things on the portrait side, or you can manipulate objects on the portrait side, and it won't affect things on the landscape side.
Interesting.
And so now for people that are Lectora users, themes and layouts, if you've used them before, they're not required. However, they do make life a lot easier. If you use themes, as you know, a theme contains all 5 views, and it already did prior to even using this version of the responsive version of Lectora. They had all the sizes in there. And if you use a theme, it will automatically switch all of your navigation out for each device. So 90 some odd predefined themes in there, all the navigation done for you. If you throw it in there, you're ready to roll.
Now, is this easier in Lectora because of the nature of the fact that it generates HTML versus something like Flash, which really I can't see responsive working in Flash, at least nowhere easily?
Yeah, Flash is great at scaling. So Flash would be the fluid or scaling design, but that's it. And so
right,
I don't think you'll see a lot of responsive without HTML.
Yep. Now, is this HTML or HTML5?
HTML5, right? So
HTML5.
It's HTML5 with fallback in HTML4. The responsive title will still play on IE8. However, you will get the desktop view on IE8, as you would expect. So it's HTML5 with fallback to HTML4 where necessary.
Okay.
Layouts, again, another feature of Lectora that's been there for a while, but we've enhanced it. You now have what we call responsive layouts, where you can design the layout of a page in multiple views. So each layout, if you decide for your image to be on the left and your text to be on the right, or vice versa, however you want to design, you can design it in a row on one view and a column on another view, and you can actually design any kind of folding layout you want. And then when you fill it in, it'll get automatically filled in for each view. So you can really set up your page layouts beforehand and then just fill them in as you go.
So as a developer, you have a lot of capability to decide where the content goes, meaning where it's going to fold and everything else.
Absolutely. And so, voila, we have, this is Lectora Online. So we're running inside of a browser here. We're actually running inside of Firefox, I believe. And we have responsive. So if you've seen Lectora before, the new piece here is the responsive bar at the top. And this gives you all of your different device views up here. So we're in edit mode now. And on this, I've rebuilt that same title in the same sort of way. I just have these set up here as images. I have a few text blocks here. And these would be just links to pages if I had a title that was a Great Astronomer's title here. And so, what would this look like on other devices? So we've always said at Trivantis that the tablet in landscape mode should be the same as the desktop mode. And guess what? It's exactly the same.
Mhm.
You really shouldn't have to make any changes there unless you really want to. So the idea being that if you want to put in some, something to deal with a hamburger menu, something like that, you could put it on here, even though the layout, the
Sure.
screen size will be the same. You could put additional things on here that you wanted to for a tablet landscape mode, but you don't really need to. Tablet landscape mode works just fine like it does on the desktop.
And the only thing I would caution people with, and this is a design issue that's prevalent in e-learning, they don't think tablet, they don't think desktop, they just think I'm creating a course, I'm putting as much as I can on a page, and then how come it doesn't flow well? Design,
Yeah.
design. It's really important to think of that design thing before you do this, because in this case, you have a well-designed page with large pictures and icons, which will lend itself to a tablet. But the tablet is a lot smaller, and people forget that. And then they go, how come I can't read my tablet? Well, because 10-point font doesn't look as good when you go from a 27-inch to a 9-inch tablet.
Yeah. Yeah. We found that as well. And you notice we changed the default font now to 12 from 10 because 10
Yes.
point just doesn't work.
It's too small. Yep.
Yeah, it's just too small. It worked for desktop fine. Doesn't really
Yep.
work on there. So when we take this down to a phone, what you'll see is we've increased the size. Lectora automatically increased the size of the page a little bit, gave us a little more room down here, but still kept it in very readable fonts. So everything works pretty well. And in general, you'll find towards the landscape size, you probably won't have to do a whole lot because the Lectora will scale the images and it will stretch the text blocks, but leave the font large so it'll still be readable. So on the phone, still works very well. When we get over to the tablet and portrait, you'll see the tablet's got a longer and portrait side, but it still looks pretty nice. It's actually, move these down. It's scaled everything out a little bit. I could adjust it if I want to, but I don't necessarily need to on the page. It depends on if I really want to or not. And then we take the same page and we go over to the phone in portrait, which is usually the greatest challenge to fit on because it's a much smaller area. And as you see, things got a little bit cramped up. And so really, it's probably not your best layout. So what would we do? Well, we would just make a few adjustments. And when I make this adjustment, you'll see that, and hopefully this comes through, that this turns to orange. The color of this turns orange. That means we've made an override. That means I've made a change here in this side that is unique to the phone piece. So I have made a change and put this in here and centered it. So I have a change. Now that change did not get set over here. This is still blue and in a different area. We've made the change uniquely to the phone side. And then I can do the same thing here. I can move these up. So if I wanted on the phone to have these in a fashion sort of like this, and now I'm, again, challenging myself to make sure I remember the names of my astronomers. I could just lay it out like this. And now, as you see, as I do each of these, they each get a unique color that shows that it was set for this specific size. And so because I just have to line these up because it's driving me crazy. All right. So you'll see that with a few clicks, we've laid it out. And now, that actually would be pretty workable on a phone. So now we've laid out our title on the phone and each of our pieces. Just took a few seconds and we've laid it out. So we've tried to combine the best of all the previous methods.
And it didn't affect the layout of your other settings.
Right, exactly. Now, what does affect, we do have inheritance, and we try to indicate it through these arrows that changes you make on a desktop. So if I make a change here, it's reflected in both directions out from here. But if I make a change on the portrait side, I can make it in the tablet, and it'll reflect down to the phone, but not the other direction. So it allows you to make as few changes as possible while editing your content. So you can edit it in one area. Generally, 90 some odd % of your changes should be just on the desktop. You're doing everything on the desktop. And then there may be a few nips and tucks you have to do here and there to make it more attractive on the other devices.
That's pretty good. And you don't have to completely redesign the course because you're just tweaking certain pages. You may have a 20-page course, but a lot of them already fit the pattern you want. You may only have to tweak 2 or 3 of them.
Exactly. And generally, if you use things like themes and layouts, you don't even need to go, how they're going to look on those other pages. So it's just going to work. Yeah, we're pretty happy about it. We're getting a lot of good reviews on it, so it seems to be working pretty well. Just rolled out on Lectora Online, is now available for Lectora Online, and it's rolling out for desktop later this year.
This just literally came out this week.
Yeah, yes, it did. Absolutely, brand new.
In fact, I just got my Lectora Online subscription. I've been playing a little bit with it. It's really cool.
Yeah. It's nice. You don't have to install. You never have to do updates. It's just updated for you automatically. As we roll fixes in, those fixes will just come right through. So, makes a big difference for us and for the user. Is able to get out that kind of responsiveness to the user as well.
From your testing, how have the users responded to this in terms of development? Are they finding it easy to do, or is it challenging them a little bit?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is with people who have been working in a static way for a long time. I just worked with a company this morning, actually, and some of yesterday, taking a lot of their titles and going through how we would be converting them over. They had some long legacy titles, and they do things like they used an entire screen, one image for a background, and then everything fit on that image. And of course, the image was designed in a landscape style. And with that, that's not very responsive. I mean, it did when you went down to these other devices, the image was scaled down, but it didn't really utilize the real estate. And so we had to talk about how we would utilize the real estate. So it's thinking spatially is really what it comes down to, is to be able to look at a little bit different, not be closed into that single desktop, that there will be other views that are available that you really need to think about, different ways to do it.
So instead of thinking outside the box, we're thinking inside the grid.
Ooh.
You like that, right?
Can I quote you on that?
You can quote me on that one. I'll send that off to Scott, the marketing master.
There you go.
But really, that's what you're doing. You're thinking outside the box and thinking in the grid, because if you can think of a grid and the way grids fold upon themselves, which I think spreadsheets do to a certain point, it's the same idea. And so if you can conceptualize or visualize that, the development will become a lot easier. Yeah,
that's true. And a lot of it comes down to just breaking things up. So we had, on these a lot of these backgrounds that we were working with that were full screen backgrounds, we just broke it up into a header, a footer, and then a repeating middle.
Okay.
And instead of the background being the background image, we said just that repeating middle as the background image, and the header and footer. And so
for example,
that helped out.
In the image you have here, the top image is probably more than one image?
Actually, the top image is one image, and then the bottom, we have a bottom. I have it fade into a color, and then it fades into a color, and that actually, you see that fade in down here. So this is a little bit different layout, but it works as well because it's designed to flow into a fade. Doesn't matter how long the device is; it's just going to fade into that color and go on.
Yeah. Now, for example, if you're doing design like this, would you, for example, in the upper portion where you have some text, would you do that in the graphic or would you do that in Lectora proper?
Text, if it's text, you usually want to do it in Lectora proper.
Okay.
The idea being that the text will not get scaled with the graphic, and you won't lose any resolution in the text.
Right.
So you want text to be text as long as you can.
And as far as fonts, I suppose WebKit fonts, any WebKit font would be worthwhile?
Yes, web-safe fonts. In addition, I mean, there are ways you can include fonts in from, font catalogs as well by including those in. And we're looking at adding that in actually as a standard feature as well, just to be able to include any web-based font you wanted.
Yeah, we've done that. And sometimes it's not Lectora per se, but just in general, it's a little problematic, especially when you're going out and people don't have any fonts. It can be interesting sometimes.
Yeah, the simplest way is to stick with the web-safe fonts. And we have, we keep those listed here. I mean, you have a set of web-safe fonts. We list all the different web-safe fonts here. But if you want, you can go outside of the box again and go for some other fonts. But it's that those will be represented the same across all devices.
Outside the grid. Remember that. Outside the grid.
Inside the grid.
Outside
the
grid.
box and inside the grid.
That's right.
This is it. We're going with that. I think that's the new statement. You saw it here first.
Yeah. I got my Lectora or my Trivantis T-shirt, polo the other day. It's really quite nice. I think it's made by Nike too. It's really good quality.
Yes.
So that was a gift from Jen Johnson, VP of Sales. So I'm wearing it today, first time. I like it.
There you go, Jen. You got a shout out. All right. Actually, one of the things I could talk about is some of the best practices
Sure.
as far as responsive design. So there's a few features that have been in Lectora for a long time that may or may not be in use in your titles, and these are things like from bottom. So when you position and size something, so these are all located at the right here, and as you go to each device or the devices that don't have overrides, they are in a similar position here, but moved slightly down. But let's say I wanted some bottom navigation. So let's say I had a piece that I wanted to put down here. So if I was just going to insert a shape, and let's say that shape I wanted to be right here along the bottom, okay, and I always wanted that shape to be on the bottom, and that meant something to me. Well, when I did that, I would use the offset from bottom. Now that is not a new feature. That's been in Lectora for a long time, but it becomes much more important with responsive design. So now, because I've said that's from bottom, its coordinates is no longer based from here, it's based from here. So its Y is actually 32. So we're saying it's 32 pixels from the bottom. So now, and when we go to each device, you'll see it stays at the bottom of the device. So even here, it's at the bottom of the device. So if you use bottom navigation on your title, which a lot of titles do, you definitely want to use from bottom to make sure that it's on the bottom. So that way it'll always be defined at the bottom of the page for your device.
That's really good.
So it's a good tip for creating this stuff, because you'll always run into a title and you're wondering, well, boy, that's at the bottom of my desktop. Why isn't it the bottom here? Because you need to define it as from bottom. So that
makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, it's a great.
And it's interesting. Throughout the last 20 years, we've been doing e-learning development and design. We always put our navigation in the lower right, and people say, why? And it's a real simple reason: eye tracking. Our eyes track from upper left to lower right. So if you keep them going in that direction, navigation becomes natural, straightforward, rather than forcing them back up or to the sides. Just a little bit of biophysics.
And that's where the offset right, offset bottom, because navigation was generally down there and people wanted to use that. So that's why we've always had offset from right, offset from bottom. But offset from right doesn't affect much, since we scale to the device. So it's not as important anymore from the non-desktop views. But offset from bottom is extremely important. So I think you'll still tend to see a lot of bottom navigation from people. And hopefully they'll be using the offset from bottom to get that set up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely. All right. Well, do you have any more questions about responsive course design?
Well, this is pretty exciting, and obviously, one of the main keys here will be to keep your graphics either smaller or maybe a combination of graphics, so that when the grids fold onto themselves, you don't really lose anything. I mean, that's what I would see as a design. Something to think about in design. In the old days of web design, I remember Dreamweaver was famous for shims, and it would cut all graphics into shims. The problem is, this was a graphic design implementation for a database world. So in essence, when you have 100 shims in one graphic, and they couldn't figure out why they were slow, they go out to the database or to the web server 100 times.
Yep.
And that slows you down like there's no tomorrow, especially if you're a very graphic heavy piece. So 20 years ago, you would see everything going duck, 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 duck. And by then you've left. But it would take that long to paint pages, because they thought optimization of a graphic meant make hundreds of them versus one. Not a good practice. Some people still do that, and it's awful.
I remember it as well. Unfortunately, that's kind of showing our age, though.
Yeah. I think I'm beyond age already. I've gotten to the point I have no age.
Got it. Okay.
We're ageless. Yeah. Yeah. We have aged outside of the grid. That's all it is.
We're back on the outside. It's inside the grid. Come on. Outside
the grid.
Inside
Sorry.
the grid.
Well, no, actually, if we're humans, we want to be outside the grid, or we get crushed. But that's another thing.
All right.
What would you recommend in terms of graphic development in the responsive course design mode?
Well, you definitely want to choose your graphics wisely as far as size. I think you had mentioned that. You need to be aware of your mobile users. Lectora will do some things for you as far as sizing things down. For instance, if you put this in and it's a massively huge image, we'll automatically scale it down. But you want to be aware that, hey, these users may not want to pull in the same amount of volume of information as your users on the desktop. So many times if you want, let's say, this wouldn't be a good example, but let's say if we didn't want this image on here, you just take it and drag it off to the side.
Okay.
And now it wouldn't even be pulled in to this. So that wouldn't exist on this. So now your user wouldn't have to download that on this device. Now, it would still be there on this device. We're not changing anything on the other devices. But what you've said is, hey, on this page, it's not that important. I don't want to have to take the bandwidth from my user and put it on the device. So you just drag it out to the side. It doesn't come down to that device.
Okay. Now, in the case of a publish, is this a one-time publish where you publish for all the different formats, or is it actually truly responding to whatever environment you're in?
Yes and yes, I think is the answer. It is a one-time publish. You publish down there, and we create the different data files for each device.
Okay.
So you'll see when we publish now, we create a directory, but those directories contain some data files and some information for each device. And then when we load up, when you switch devices, because remember when you're in portrait mode and you switch to landscape, it has to reload the page. And so we actually create this and do it in the different views. And so the page, instead of reloading, it actually just reformats the page based upon the information you have. So we just keep information that tells us how to format the page. So you can actually do things like take a matching question in portrait halfway, turn your phone, it'll reformat it, and you can finish the matching question in landscape if you want. So
pretty cool.
All things you can do.
Yeah, just when you thought your life was going to get easier as a developer, you got more work, right?
Yeah.
This is beautiful, though. It's this is probably the best implementation of responsive or fluid design I've seen, because, like you said, it takes the different aspects. It's kind of like, in the photography world, in the video world, we have 5-axis gimbals. So they arrange everything and stabilize things in 5 axis. So you've got your X, Y, Z, and whatever else. And this is sort of the same idea. You're reformatting in really X, Y, and Z to a certain point. Now let me ask you, in the future of e-learning, do you see 3D playing any part? And how would this affect 3D?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you think of things like the HoloLens, Microsoft's HoloLens project, where you'd have assisted reality, or they add to reality where you view things and view things on top of that, it would be outstanding if you were developing a course on how to fix a certain part in a vehicle or to do anything physical. That would be amazing. However, that is a completely new level of e-learning design, as you'll be building 3D rendered images on top of virtual reality layers. And so
now that would be something interesting to talk about for the future, because the HoloLens is still brand new technology, at least as far as commercial consumer. And there is a developer kit for it. In the future, I could see a Lectora development kit for something like that. That would be very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
In military
and always
applications, military, medical, manufacturing applications, like you said, car mechanics, all of those could benefit quite a bit from that 3D learning environment. That would be pretty cool.
Right. And that would be some pretty interesting stuff to write. So I'd like to write that code.
That would be fun.
That would be quite the challenge.
Have you looked at that yet? The HoloLens developer kit?
I have not looked at it yet, but I'm familiar. I've kept up with the HoloLens and all the things going on. It's pretty interesting.
It's exciting.
Some fun stuff.
It's kind of neat. I mean, hopefully they can really do it and do it right. But the demos they're showing are great.
Still demos, though.
Still demos. Yeah.
Still demos.
Yeah. With video.
Next year. It's out next year, I believe, for consumers. So
it's not out yet. I thought they had. Oh, maybe the developer kit got moved back. Originally, they were talking about November, December, but that was for the developer kit and the lens. But they're probably trying to get as much interest as they can, then release it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Looks really cool.
Did you
I
want to come
definitely
back
have
on?
some applications for
Did you
eLearning.
want to come back on screen?
Sure, I'll come back.
Well, John,
There I
welcome
am.
back.
Hi.
That is really cool. The response. So you probably had a lot of fun doing this one.
It was interesting. And when we started out, this was not the plan. We were actually looking at doing a more common responsive design way to do it. And then, got in and started working with all the different devices and was just frustrated trying to get the right look and feel on devices, and worked with it and then finally realized that this is just not the way to go. I just was not happy with how it turned out. And that's what begat responsive course design.
It's good because, it all started really with InDesign, where they had what they called liquid design, which is really kind of a responsive design. And it didn't go as far as everybody thought it would. Then Adobe Muse came out, which became adaptive, if you will, but you had to do a lot of work to make it become adaptive. Not hard, but it required literally developing 3 versions, or at least 2. Captivate took, I think, their version from Muse, because it looks the same, where you take bits and pieces and then rebuild it. Again, it's not terribly hard, but it's not that flexible, and it's still fleshing itself out. This is much more advanced and much more fluid. This is the first I've seen in an e-learning environment where you have a responsive design that's this fluid, and that's, I think, what makes it very exciting.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I think
It is good stuff.
I think we'll get a lot of use out there, and I think once people, you get into it, it is a little bit different. And along with if the company is not ready for responsive design, it still works the same way it always did before. If you create a non-responsive title, you can still do that. Not a problem. But it is just something new that you can do if you want to.
Always fun having you on, and remember, think outside the box, think inside the grid.
Got it.
That's the new.
It's our new tagline.
It is a good tagline. I like it. Yeah, out of the mouth of babes. But anyway, hey John, a real pleasure. I know you're real busy right now with all the work you're doing. For you to take time out and share this with us, and it's available now, which is even greater.
Absolutely.
I didn't even realize this was coming out this week. I started drooling when I saw that. So I went, it's already available? Wow. So this is very good stuff. I can't wait to see some of the courses people design with this. And I'm sure it's going to take a little bit, but once they get into it, it's going to be a lot of fun demos of courses.
Absolutely.
Takes it to a whole new level. So,
all right.
Well, that's great. Well, John, appreciate you coming on. Good luck with all the development that you're doing. And if you're watching the show, please subscribe. Give us your feedback. And we will have a video similar to what John presented today also in the show notes. So if you want to get a more specific look at the example, John will do that in the video. So we'll put that up there as well as with the show. So, John, appreciate you coming on again, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Have a good one, everyone. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.